Today on RoxomTV News, a Reddit tip helps crack a multi-state manhunt tied to a deadly campus shooting, and the suspect is found dead in a storage unit, not a courtroom. The Justice Department hits its deadline to release the Epstein files, reopening one of the most uncomfortable chapters in modern American justice. And TikTok signs a deal to stay alive in the United States, proving the app might survive Congress, but the drama is absolutely not over. All that and more right now on today's show. Let's go. Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday, and welcome to another edition of RoxomTV News. I am Hank Hudson. Starting off with today's top stories, and across New England, an investigation that stretched from a college campus in Rhode Island to a storage facility in New Hampshire has now come into clearer focus. Police say the suspect in last week's mass shooting at Brown University was identified in part because of an anonymous tip that started on Reddit. Authorities identified the suspect as Claudio Manuel Neves Valente, a 48-year-old Portuguese national and former Brown University student from the early 2000s. Now, investigators say the same individual is actually believed to be responsible for the killing of an MIT professor in Massachusetts as well, only days later. The breakthrough came when officers received a tip pointing them to a Reddit post describing a gray Nissan with Florida license plates near the Brown campus. Now, the person who wrote the post later contacted police directly and described encountering a suspicious man inside Brown's Barris and Holly engineering building hours before the shooting. According to investigators, that witness noticed that clothing that seemed inappropriate for the weather and followed the man briefly outside, where the vehicle became a key detail. Now, the tip helped investigators trace the car to a rental agreement out of Boston, which led them to Valente's name. Now, from there, surveillance footage connected the same vehicle to the area near the home of the MIT professor Nuno F. Luriaro, who was killed only 2 days later after the Brown attack. Now, authorities later tracked the vehicle north to a storage facility in Salem, New Hampshire, where Valente was found dead. Officials say there is no ongoing threat to the public, though the suspect's motives still remain unknown. Investigators also confirmed that Valente had rented hotel rooms in Boston and changed the vehicle's license plate during the manhunt. In the aftermath, the Trump administration announced a suspension of the U.S. green card lottery program, citing national security concerns tied to the case. Supporters argue the pause is preventative. Critics warn against drawing immigration policy conclusions before all facts in the case are known. Now, why this matters to people watching at home is not just about how the case ended. It's about how a single tip from an ordinary person online helped connect the dots when communities were desperate for answers. The investigation continues, but the search is far from over. And after weeks of political tension and years of public pressure, today arrives with a deadline Washington cannot dodge. We, of course, are talking about the Department of Justice, who is now legally required to begin releasing the long-sealed investigative files connected to Jeffrey Epstein. This release didn't happen quietly or voluntarily. Congress forced the issue in November, passing legislation compelling disclosure after repeated delays and walkbacks from the administration. President Donald Trump signed the bill despite previously dismissing calls for transparency as a partisan distraction. Now, what makes this moment unusual is that the push to open the files didn't fall cleanly along party lines. Some of the strongest voices demanding disclosure came from the Republicans, turning this into an uncomfortable bipartisan reckoning. Epstein, a powerful financier with deep social and political connections, was arrested in 2019 on federal child sex trafficking charges. He died by alleged suicide, weeks later in a Manhattan jail, a moment that only intensified public suspicion and outrage. But this story didn't start there. In 2008, Epstein received a controversial plea deal in Florida that spared him from federal prosecution and limited jail time, a decision that has haunted the justice system for more than a decade now. Now, the files set for release relate to multiple federal investigations that could shed light on how Epstein avoided accountability for so long. Trump has denied any wrongdoing and says he was unaware of Epstein's crimes despite having social ties to him in the past. Epstein's former partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, was later convicted for recruiting and grooming underage girls and is now serving a 20-year prison sentence. Now, what happens next? That's the real question. The documents may arrive slowly, heavily redacted, and wrapped in legal caution. Or they could reopen debates about privilege, power, and whether the justice system plays by different rules for different people. Now, why should this matter to those of you at home? Because trust in institutions doesn't erode all at once. It leaks out over moments like this. And what the public learns from these files could shape how much faith remains in the system. Moving now to across the pond, where the European Union has approved a massive new aid package for Ukraine, committing roughly $105 billion over the next 2 years. After months of internal debate, EU leaders chose to fund the package through joint borrowing backed by the EU budget, instead of tapping frozen Russian assets. That decision sidestepped legal uncertainty and potential lawsuits while still locking in sustained financial support for Kiev. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky welcomed the move, calling it a financial security guarantee and emphasizing that Russian assets should remain frozen until reparations are paid. The European Union Council president added that Ukraine would only be expected to repay these loans once Russia compensates for the damage caused by the war. Or, in other words, repayment lives somewhere far down the road. This new commitment builds on more than 187 billion euros Europe has already sent to Ukraine since Russia's invasion began back in 2022. It also quietly strengthens Europe's hand in shaping future peace talks alongside the United States. While negotiations continue behind closed doors, the funding ensures Ukraine can keep paying government workers, maintaining basic services, and sustaining its defense efforts. Now, why this should matter to people watching at home? Well, multi-year funding commitments of this size influence energy markets, defense budgets, currency stability, and overall investor appetite. And those pressures don't stay contained to Europe. They ripple through inflation expectations, capital flows, and global markets in ways that eventually reach everyone. So something we'll want to keep an eye on. We're going to take a quick break here at RoxomTV News, but when we're back, we'll be joined by the Bitcoin libertarian to talk about TikTok's latest deal to stay open in the U.S. and several other stories. So stay tuned. More news coming your way right after this quick break. All right, welcome back to RoxomTV News. It's time. We're going to keep going over the top stories of the day, so let's get back into it. So in New York, inside boardrooms and far away from Capitol Hill grandstanding, TikTok quietly took a major step towards staying alive here in the United States. The company says it has signed a deal to spin off its U.S. operations into a new American-controlled entity, according to a memo sent to employees by CEO Xu Shu. Now, the who here is TikTok, its Chinese parent company ByteDance, and a group of mostly American investors led by Oracle, Silver Lake, and Emirati-backed MGX. The what here is a joint venture that would place operational control of the U.S. version of TikTok into American hands, at least on paper. Now, this move exists because Congress passed a law requiring TikTok to divest from ByteDance or face a nationwide ban over national security concerns. President Donald Trump supported this deal and delayed enforcement of the law while negotiations continued, keeping the app available for roughly 170 million Americans. Under the agreement, the U.S. TikTok entity will retrain its algorithm using American user data while Oracle oversees data storage and content moderation. ByteDance would retain a minority stake and continue handling global e-commerce and advertising, meaning this is more of a controlled separation than a clean break. The deal is not final and still requires approval from regulators in both Washington and Beijing, with China so far offering careful non-answers. Now, why this matters to those of you at home watching is actually pretty straightforward. This determines whether one of the most powerful media platforms in the world stays on your phone or disappears overnight. It also sets the template for how the U.S. handles foreign-owned tech companies going forward. And if you're wondering whether this ends the TikTok saga, well, it probably doesn't. It simply moves the drama into its next season. Now, joining us to talk about this story and others, today we have one of our good friends of the program, Fernando, the Bitcoin Libertarian. Fernando, happy Friday. Welcome back to the show. Always great having you on. How are you doing?
I'm on Saturday, but yes, happy Friday for everyone.
Hey, Fernando, can you say that again? My reception with you is a little choppy, buddy.
Yeah, I think I see you like as I always said, I'm on the future. Today is already Saturday, so but happy to be here.
Yeah, always a pleasure to have you on the show, Fernando. So I want to talk about this TikTok story, okay? So we've been waiting for this deal for some time here. We're wondering if TikTok was still going to be available here in the United States. And TikTok is saying this deal puts control in American hands, but it still feels like a government-forced corporate rearrangement. From a libertarian perspective, Fernando, is this national security or the state deciding which apps are allowed to exist? What's the beat you're getting from this deal?
Well, I'm a libertarian, but again, of course, always the state wants to control, but in the social media, the thing is that I don't use TikTok because I'm here in Hong Kong. We cannot use TikTok. We are forced to use the TikTok from China that I cannot use because it's all in Chinese. So I cannot use TikTok. So I'm not so much on the.
Yeah.
But I think that, of course, as a libertarian point of view, I would say United States needs to leave TikTok be and let the people use TikTok no matter what. But as a national security point of view, you are giving thousands of millions of data points of behavior of American people to China. That is your biggest competitor. On the other side, China has banned, if you go to mainland China, you cannot use Google, you cannot use WhatsApp, you cannot use Instagram, you cannot use Facebook. Because of the same, they argue that it's for national security. From a libertarian point of view, I say, okay, everyone needs to use any platform. The government doesn't have to be in the middle of the citizens. But as a libertarian, I also think that the government needs to provide security to the government only needs to provide security and justice. So if this move is to move the platform for national security to take the data control from the Chinese parent company, this is okay. Then what the government of the United States is gonna do with the data, we don't know, because it's probably, I don't know, the government of the United States wants to use the data for their own use, but yeah, I think that any control is bad, but if it's towards and real for national security, it's good. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I kind of have to agree with this, and I'll give you a couple reasons why. First of all, the very fact that China blocks so many websites for those same reasons makes me think that they're thinking, well, we do this with our apps and things that we give to other countries, so it's likely the United States is doing it. So it's almost definitely they are using that to get information on the United States. And there's actually a big thing going on with DJI. It's a drone company where they're having similar issues. They're talking about not selling them in the United States because everybody's taking pictures and video and getting all this data. It's getting sent right back to China, right? And another thing that's particularly interesting about this that I've heard before was that There have been plenty of rumors about the Chinese kind of purposely changing the algorithm for the United States as opposed to what's in China. So if you apparently use TikTok in China, it's mostly educational things that would actually help the younger generations of your economy grow and become smarter, when here I've heard they purposely kind of fill it with all this slop that just makes us all dumber and waste our time on things that ultimately aren't important. So I, for one, am I'm happy that this is going through, and TikTok, as great as it is, has wasted millions and billions of man hours right now of people in the American economy. So it'd be nicer if maybe we could usher them toward like learning stuff rather than celebrity trash. Now, this ban also sets a bit of an interesting precedent, Fernando, because it was kind of more like this whole agreement's been more of a sell or else type of situation. So my question is, do you see this as kind of a soft version of economic coercion that sets a dangerous precedent for foreign companies operating here in the United States? Because this is a big deal that could have consequences that land far beyond TikTok. What are your thoughts about this particular situation and what it could mean for other companies operating in the United States?
To be honest, I don't have any conclusion on that. Of course, can set up like a precedent for future companies operating in the United States. But again, I think that let's believe on the U.S. government that they are doing this for national security, because, as you said, probably the TikTok. I never use TikTok. I just saw a few videos, because here in Hong Kong is banned, the American, the Western version of TikTok. I can only use the Chinese version. But I heard that in China they force to put some educational content, something like that. The algorithm now they passed a law that if you are an influencer, you must have a degree. That of the field that you are influencing. For example, if you're a health influencer, you must be a doctor. You cannot be a random person. Probably in the United States, they force the algorithm to. I saw many stupid stuff from TikTok. I never used, but I saw many stupid challenges on TikTok. That's with that said, probably for the future foreign companies operating in the United States, probably they will try to not to mess with the data if they want to operate there with no problems. Can be, but let's believe in the American government that they are doing this on the best for Americans.
Yeah. And another thing about TikTok too, before we move on, we're in this world where social media seems to reward the most polarizing takes, not necessarily the most grounded ones. And, that causes a lot of divisiveness within the people here in the United States. We're always listening to the radical left or radical right, because those are what ultimately get the clicks, when the people in the middle really aren't getting the platforms they need. And it definitely embeds some cultural disruptions into the people of our country here in a time where we need to be more unified than ever before. And so I'll be curious to see what it does. Hopefully it bears some good fruit for people here in the United States, because we're really wasting a lot of our time on that app. I'm glad to hear you're not on it. That's probably why you're so much smarter than all of us, because you're not wasting your time on that silly thing. All right, we're going to move on to our next story here, Fernando, because after decades of free money and economic denial, Japan has finally moved the dial. The Bank of Japan raised interest rates to 0.75%, the highest level the country has seen since 1995. Now, this wasn't a surprise move. What was notable, though, is the tone. The BOJ didn't just hike, it signaled it's ready to keep hiking if its forecasts were to hold. Now, for a country that practically invented zero interest rates, that is a philosophical shift. The central bank says wages are rising, inflation is sticking, and the long-promised cycle of growth and price increases is finally real. In plain English, Japan thinks it no longer needs emergency monetary life support. Now, the language change here really matters. You see, back in October, the BOJ warned growth could stall because of higher U.S. tariffs. That caution is seemingly now gone. Instead, officials say the economy should grow at a moderate pace, and inflation is expected to keep climbing toward its 2% target. Markets reacted instantly to this news. The yen slid, Japanese stocks jumped, and the government bond yield spiked to levels not seen in more than 2 decades. Now, that reaction tells you something very important. Japan's entire financial system has been built around cheap money for a generation. Changing that foundation, even slowly, sends shockwaves through the system. The BOJ insists real interest rates will remain low for now, which is central bank speak for this is still very much experimental. Governor Kazu Oyeda avoided committing to a clear path forward, saying future moves will depend on incoming data. Or in other words, translation, uncertainty remains, but avoided for now. So why this should matter to our audience at home that's not in Japan? Well, you see, Japan itself has been the global test case for the extreme monetary policy for years. If unwinding decades of stimulus proves painful, other central banks watching closely may hesitate to normalize. If it works, it strengthens the case that artificial money eventually has to face reality. Either way, this is what the end of an era actually looks like. Bringing Fernando back. Fernando, Japan kept interest rates near zero for decades. Now that they're finally raising them, does this look like a smart reset to you, or the bill coming due after years of easy money? What's your read on this situation?
Studying the Japanese monetary policy, what they did some kind of decentralization of regional banks that constantly give loans at zero interest rate. Of course, this becoming economical growth. This become also the real estate in Japan become super expensive because of these rates, and now they seem that they are abandoning that. So what happened what led to the investor is do this famous carry trade. So big money in a market that probably zero cost, invest in another side of the world and get some return, and then give the money back and make money. So seems that this is gonna come to an end with the hike of the rates of Japan. And this can have an impact on all the narrative was, I'm the Bitcoin libertarian. So mostly all of the news that I watch, I try to see how are the effects on Bitcoin. And many people were telling that Bitcoin is going to still go down after these hikes. Because what happened in the past, I think we have some kind of hikes in 2024. The price of Bitcoin went down 25% or 30%. In March, in middle of 2024 happened similar to this, and the price went down 30%, the price of Bitcoin. And I think that the beginning of this year in January also happened rumors with the Bank of Japan, and the price went down. The thing is that out of 3 times, only 1 time was really connected with the Bank of Japan. The other 2, when Bitcoin went down, probably can be connected to the Bank of Japan hiking rates or not, because there were other macro events affecting. So what we need to do is we need to wait in the next coming weeks, because one of the things is that now in Western world, there come a couple of weeks that everything is quiet. Now people go Christmas, markets are not so busy. So let's see what can happen with the hike of the rate. Of course, when this happens, every hike of the rate of the central bank of any country, it impacts on the investments, especially in the risk investments. Because if you have free money, you put on risk assets. If you don't have free money, you try to be more conservative. Usually the analysts say that we need to wait probably 2 weeks. In my case, due that Christmas is coming in the middle, probably we need to wait 2, 3, 4 weeks to see the effect. But in my opinion, something that has been happening this year is that all the potential, the hike of the rate has already been priced in. Because this year, and we repeated multiple times, most of the market movements were were triggered by rumors or by tweets or by markets saying,
Right.
okay, this is going to happen because with Polymarket now, you probably know what is going to happen like 2 weeks in advance. So investors act in consequence of this future data, and usually the after is not as hard as the before of the new.
Right.
Happened on the opposite side. United States dropped 3 times the interest rate this year, and it's gonna continue dropping. And we didn't see a correlation in the price of Bitcoin and other risk, so-called risk assets. So we need to wait. I think that the price, the effect has already been priced in. Let's see what happens in the next 4 weeks. But usually, of course, it's like when you rise, it's demand and supply. If you raise the price of capital, less people is going to take capital and invest in risk on assets. The carry trade probably will stop or will lower down. But let's see what happens. Let's see if the effect has already been priced in, or if we will see a price drop in Bitcoin and other assets in the upcoming weeks.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a buy the rumor, sell the news situation that we've seen before. As you mentioned, they lowered interest rates here in the United States by 0.25 points just last week or so, and the market already seemingly had it priced in, and I think we're seeing that here now. But I want to kind of circle back to the market impact something like this could have down the line, because Japan's economy was built around cheap borrowing. So when rates go up after that long, who do you think feels it first in real time, Fernando? Is the government going to feel the effects of this, big companies, or regular people? Who's going to be the first that's hit by these changes in the Japanese government?
I think that the first, as any move on the central bank, there is an effect called the Cantillon effect. That any move on that usually the people who is closer to the printer gets the more benefits, but on my side also gets the more pain when there are the price of the money goes up, like the interest rate. So probably the investors will feel the consequences first, and of course the people. If you stop investments, it means less money in the real economy. It means less jobs. It means lower salaries, less opportunities. So at the end of the day, who always pay the price of the misconduct of the central banks are the people, the regular people, the regular workers. That's why we are educating them on Bitcoin. So I think that probably the first hit is going to be taken by the investors, but at the end of the day, who is going to pay the party are going to be the people.
Yeah, that sounds about right, unfortunately, but that just seems to be the way the world works most of the time, Fernando. So you and I are going to take a quick break, Fernando, but when... Go ahead.
Yes.
What's that?
No, that's how fiat system works. That's that
Right.
we are on Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. That's why Nancy Pelosi is like the most excellent stock trader of all time. She's close to the money printer. She knows what's happening before the rest of us do. All right, we got a lot more to talk about here on RoxomTV News with Fernando in just a minute. But first, we're going to take a quick break. But when we're back, we're going to be talking about what's going on in Taiwan and the latest news from Michael Saylor over at Strategy. So stay tuned. More RoxomTV News coming your way right after this quick break.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick, monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Fuck. Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Wish you could grab cash without selling your Bitcoin? Yeah, same. But hey, that's why Ledden exists. They're the global leader in Bitcoin-backed loans. Over $9 billion issued since 2018 with a perfect record protecting client assets. Now you might be asking, Hank, what makes a Ledden loan different? Well, you see, with custodied loans, your collateral, it stays put. They don't go degen and lend it out for yield. There are no credit checks. It funds in under 6 hours. No monthly payments. You can repay anytime with 0 penalties. And for transparency, grown-ups actually want proof of reserves reports every 6 months verified by a top accounting firm. The bottom line here, gang, is that Ledden lets Bitcoin holders unlock liquidity without selling. And you can check them out at ledden.io/RoxomTV. That's LEDN.io/RoxomTV. All right, welcome back to Roxom TV News. Taking a look at Bitcoin this morning, the price is back up to $88,000. That's about $4,000 increase from just 12 hours ago. So I think they know something we don't. And I want to move on to one of our top Bitcoin stories of the day. That's actually coming out of Taiwan, where Bitcoin has quietly moved from a seized asset to a political talking point. You see, Taiwan's Ministry of Justice says it currently holds just over 210 Bitcoin, along with roughly 1.3 billion new Taiwan dollars worth of seized crypto assets. Now, those holdings came from criminal investigations and include mostly US dollar-pegged stablecoins, plus Ether and smaller amounts of other tokens. On paper, this puts Taiwan among the top 10 governments globally in Bitcoin holdings. Not by strategy, but by circumstance. The government says the Bitcoin remains under state custody while officials decide what to do next, with options ranging from public auction to liquidation with proceeds sent to state coffers. But that disclosure immediately sparked a bigger debate. Some lawmakers are now asking whether Bitcoin should be treated as more than seized property and potentially considered a strategic reserve asset. At the same time, Taiwan's central bank is pushing in the opposite direction on stablecoins. Officials are calling for tighter oversight, mandatory licensing, and even requiring stablecoin issuers to hold reserves directly with the central bank. Joining us to talk about this story, we got Fernando. He's back. Fernando, Taiwan didn't go out and buy Bitcoin on purpose and ended up holding it through criminal seizures. Sounds familiar. Once a government is already sitting on Bitcoin like this, does the reason they got it even matter anymore? Because this sounds kind of similar to how the United States holds Bitcoin. What's your thought?
Yes, for one side, you see more and more nations taking care about of having some Bitcoin and at least coming to a debate of what to do with the Bitcoin. Yes, on the way they seize the assets is a little bit dangerous, because who stops the government in the future to, I don't know, create some kind of regulation that you are, I don't know, you are appointed as a terrorist or whatever, and you get your Bitcoin seized. Anyways, you can say, I lost my keys in a boat accident, always. So, but on the other side, it shows that the countries are starting to think about what Bitcoin means, and they are thinking about creating these strategic reserves. Of course, it's not the same as El Salvador, that they are buying Bitcoin diligently, but at least they are seizing and they are thinking about holding. Not the same as happened to Germany, that is the pizza guy of the countries that sold a big amount of Bitcoin last year for money. The most bizarre thing is that they sold Bitcoin for money that they can print at zero cost. So it's stupid what they did. But let's see what happens. When this happens, it triggers two different sentiments to me. That probably in the future, any government can say, "Oh, you are a terrorist, or you are this and that. We seize your Bitcoin." That's why it's super important to learn about self-custody and learn about privacy tools, that there are a lot. So the government, they cannot know that you have Bitcoin, because that's the goal. But on the other side, it makes me good, or it makes me like confident that the governments at least are trying to learn about Bitcoin. Otherwise, they would say, okay, nothing happened, or we sell immediately. Now they are going to start discussing what to do. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, first I want to address Germany as the pizza guy of countries is my new favorite saying. So thank you for that. That really tickled my fancy this morning. That was great. But you're right. It's, for me, I don't care how they got it as long as they're not prying it from people's hands, because to me, it's another on-ramp, right? Like Bitcoin, with the price that we've seen, it's gone over 6 digits. It's too big to ignore right now. So countries, whether they want to or not, are going to be forced to have to make a decision as to whether or not they see Bitcoin as an asset worth, keeping on their balance sheet. And we've seen the United States, while we haven't actually bought any yet, we've got hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin that we're not selling. So we're seeing those steps, happening in real time, from kind of begrudgingly holding it to saying we're not selling it, and then the next step will be acquiring it. So I think this is all part of that process. But back to Taiwan here, we've got lawmakers there openly talking about Bitcoin as part of financial sovereignty now. So my question to you, Fernando, does that sound like real understanding of Bitcoin to you, or is this just politicians finally putting words to something they can't actually ignore anymore? Do you think this is a step in the right direction for Taiwan? It's got the conversation started. You see this as a positive thing going forward?
I think that any country that discuss having Bitcoin or having a strategic reserve, no matter how they get the Bitcoin, is good for the country. So of course, many of the central bank people, they don't understand, or they try to not understand Bitcoin, but policymakers will try at least to have a debate. For me, are good news, because again, Bitcoin is becoming more mainstream, and if Taiwanese policy makers read the book of Jason Lowry, Software, I think that they will keep their Bitcoins they will not let the Bitcoin go. So it always is a good thing when a government start at least studying Bitcoin, not sell as Germany did, or Bulgaria. Bulgaria sold Bitcoin in 2000. Probably they are the pizza guy, because Bulgaria sold in 2017, and with the amount of Bitcoin they had, they can pay the national debt now. So it's always good for the country and for the citizens of the country, and especially Taiwan, that is in a position. I don't want to talk too much because I'm on the other side, but Taiwan is in a special position that they have to take care of their safety as a nation. So it's always good if a country start at least discussing what they are going to do with their Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, by the very fact that they have some now, it forces them to decide, what are we supposed to do with that? And as you and I have seen time again with almost every Bitcoiner out there, it always takes a little bit of time to kind of wrap your head around what Bitcoin is and what it means and why it's important. And I expect these governments to work the exact same way that individual people do, because ultimately all they are is people too, right? And they're going to wrap their heads around why this is so important. So I think this is a very positive development here. And what's specifically interesting to this case is that Taiwan seems relatively calm about holding Bitcoin, but much more nervous about stablecoins tied to the US dollar. Why do you think governments are more comfortable with Bitcoin than with crypto that actually moves money day to day? What are your thoughts on that?
Because Bitcoin is this, because if they are more comfortable with Bitcoin, is because they understood Bitcoin. Stablecoins are are tokenized dollar, are dollars that have first of all are issued by a company, not by a country, and this company has technically technically the bonds of United States backing this money. So at the end of the day, stablecoins are tokenized US dollars issued by a company. So that's why probably they are nervous about the stablecoin. I would sell all the stablecoin and buy more Bitcoin with this stablecoin.
Yeah, amen to that. Our next story is a guy who would also sell all of his stable coins for Bitcoin, so let's get onto that one next. Back here in the U.S., Michael Saylor, the most unapologetic Bitcoin buyer on earth, recently admitted his big mistake, and it somehow turned into a victory lap. You see, Saylor's strategy recently bought roughly $2 billion worth of Bitcoin, and the price has barely reacted. And instead of panicking, Saylor says that's exactly the point here. You see, on the Galaxy Brains podcast, Saylor argued that Bitcoin not pumping after massive corporate buys is proof that the market has grown up. In his words, a global capital network shouldn't flinch just because one billionaire shows up with a shopping cart. If a single buyer could still move the price, Saylor says, Bitcoin wouldn't be stable enough to matter at scale. He also pointed out that short-term price swings are now driven far more by leveraged derivatives and perpetual futures than the actual buying of Bitcoin. In other words, the noise is coming from traders playing financial Jenga, not from people quietly stacking sats. Bringing Fernando back. Fernando, Michael Saylor drops $2 billion into Bitcoin and the market barely moves. To you, does that signal maturity, or does it reveal how distorted price discovery has become in a leverage-driven system? What do you think's been going on there?
I think that is a good news for Saylor because he can keep buying at cheap price. What I think is that what the price is not moving because the whole sentiment of the market is that we are about to enter into a bear market. So yeah. I think that if Saylor was not buying, probably the price could drop a little bit more. So all these bearish sentiments that I don't agree at all are triggering that the price doesn't go up because no more people or no more investors. You know that the ETFs are the inflows. There are a lot of outflows from the ETF. There is all this narrative against the treasury company. The treasury company, I spoke a couple of days ago with Alex Lysette from Capital B. They are getting more difficult to raise money with all this narrative. So I think that's why the price don't move. But also, we always say Bitcoin is an asset that is getting mature. That's why I don't believe that we are entering in a bear market, or if we enter in a bear market, the price will drop significantly like other times when it went from 67, 69 to 16, or when it went from 17 to 3K. So because the institutional money is coming, Saylor can come and buy. Saylor is buying Bitcoin no matter the price, and is gonna be buying Bitcoin forever. So Bitcoin entered in this phase, and time after time, when more institutional investors come into Bitcoin, the fluctuation will be smaller and smaller and smaller. This shows the maturity, or I don't know if the correct in English is maturity, but I always say Bitcoin is living the teenage years. So now it's becoming in more an adult phase of an asset. So we are not going to be seeing big spikes, and we are not going to be big drop downs. So that's why I always say for the people, if you believe that you are going to invest in Bitcoin now, $10,000, and you are going to have 100,000 in 3 years, of course, no. But on the other side, if you invest today $10,000, probably it's not probable that your investment drops up to $3,000 or $2,000. That's the thing. So I agree that Bitcoin is becoming a mainstream asset and is becoming less volatile. And I think that that's what all we want to do. We want to see, because if Bitcoin becomes less volatile, we can see more adoption. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're at such a fundamentally different place than we were in previous cycles. It kind of makes me think of like Bitcoin as a boat in the ocean, right? And when you have a smaller boat, it reacts more severely to the undulation of the waves. And when your boat keeps getting bigger, it's a little more stabilized across the same type of waters. And that's kind of what we're seeing now. And you mentioned sentiment, very interesting situation right now, right? Because we've never had more favorable government, institutional tailwinds than we've ever seen before in the Bitcoin market. Yet the sentiment, as you mentioned, seems to be down. And I think part of the reason of that is those Bitcoin treasury companies, because people oftentimes associate anything bad that happens with Bitcoin as being a product of Bitcoin itself instead of the people that are actually managing the Bitcoin. And now there's this negative narrative around the treasury companies, and that is kind of lending itself to the overall sentiment with Bitcoin, which I think is kind of suppressing the price artificially right now. But back to Saylor, he says that if one billionaire could still move Bitcoin's price the way it had in years past, it wouldn't be stable enough to really matter. Do you agree with that statement, Fernando, or do you think that Wall Street style financialization can still overwhelm what Bitcoin was originally built to be? What's your thought about the era we're in right now with Bitcoin?
Yeah, we are entering, there is a lot of discussion between the maxis if Bitcoin needs to be used as a medium of exchange, a store of value, if Wall Street needs to go to Bitcoin. In my point of view, Bitcoin is a living organism, and you cannot, is for everyone, is permissionless. So Bitcoin will take the space, or will take the position on the financial markets that is the best for Bitcoin. If the best use for Bitcoin is going to become the global currency, this will be done, and this will be the best. If Bitcoin is, as Saylor said in Abu Dhabi, digital capital that is turned into digital credit, that's Bitcoin. So I am not a critic. I am not of these that say, oh, it's doing good, it's doing that. Bitcoin is doing what it have to do, is mine one block every 10 minutes. Then the use that we give to Bitcoin, it depends where we need it the most. So probably now I think we need the big money from Wall Street to make it mainstream. We need to, because the number go up is a good catalyst to bring people in, to make more people use. So if Saylor can, with their instruments, get a small portion of this $300 trillion in fixed income debt, this is going to be huge for the price of Bitcoin, and more people will come, more money from Wall Street, from the big capital markets will come, and that's going to be this will trigger the hyper Bitcoinization. That it's all what we want.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of Field of Dreams. You know, if people keep building these products around Bitcoin, the more people are going to keep coming to it, and we're going to see that number go up, which sparks the next catalyst for the next big price and adoption that we're seeing here, every year. But we're in the business, so we see it more often than everyone else who's just out there kind of half paying attention. But it's exciting times, and I'm excited for 2026. And I'm always excited to have you here on the show with us, Fernando. It's always an absolute pleasure, and I appreciate you sticking up so late with us to join us. I know you're all the way in Hong Kong. Before we let you go, though, you have your own amazing podcast. You have some great takes on Twitter. Where can our audience find those if they decided they still need more of Fernando for their Friday?
Yes, my podcast is on YouTube. In English, Libertarian BTC is the channel. In Spanish, Libertarian BTC ESP. My Twitter is the Bitcoin __ in English, the Bitcoin ESP _ in Spanish. You can find me there. I have other social media, but these are the main ones.
Amazing. Well, Fernando, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today, and happy holidays and a happy new year to you. I'm sure I'll be seeing you plenty more in 2026, so I can't wait. But happy holidays to you and yours in the meantime.
It's been a pleasure to be part of Roxom and your show this year. Hope we come back on next year, and Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays to everyone.
All right, love it. Thanks, Fernando. We'll see you soon, buddy. We're going to take a quick break here at the at Roxom TV News. And when we're back, we're going to be talking about a U.S. governor pardoning one of your favorite country singers. Stay tuned for that and more when we return after this quick break. Are you interested in effortlessly growing your Bitcoin portfolio? I sure am. And the Bitcoin credit card by Gemini earns you Bitcoin back on every purchase. You can use it like any credit card, buy lunch, gas, or your weekly groceries, and you'll earn up to 4% back instantly in Bitcoin or one of over 50 other cryptos straight to your account. All that with no annual fee, and right now, you can grab a $200 Bitcoin welcome bonus. It's the easiest way to start building your Bitcoin stack. Just go to Gemini.com to learn more. Welcome back to our second hour of Roxom TV News. Here is what we covered during the first hour of this morning's program. Police say that the suspect in last week's mass shooting at Brown University has been found dead at a storage facility in New Hampshire. Investigators identified Claudio Manuel Neves Valente, a former Brown student, after an anonymous Reddit tip helped trace a rental car connected to both the campus shooting and later the killing of an MIT professor. And time is up for the Department of Justice to release the long-sealed investigative files connected to Jeffrey Epstein. The release follows years of public pressure and frustration over how Epstein avoided accountability for so long despite his powerful connections. What ultimately becomes public and what remains redacted could shape public trust in the justice system moving forward. And TikTok says it has signed a deal to spin off its U.S. operations into a new American-controlled entity to avoid a nationwide ban. The agreement would give U.S. investors and Oracle operational control, while ByteDance retains a minority stake and continues handling global business functions. If approved by regulators in both Washington and Beijing, the deal could keep the app available to millions of Americans and set a precedent for how the U.S. handles foreign-owned tech platforms. All right, let's get started on our top stories of this second hour. So from a closed conference room in Washington, D.C., a very familiar argument made a very loud return. Former special counsel Jack Smith told members of the House Judiciary Committee that his team found proof beyond a reasonable doubt that President Donald Trump engaged in a criminal scheme to overturn the 2020 election. Smith also said Trump repeatedly attempted to obstruct justice to conceal classified documents found at Mar-a-Lago after leaving office. Now, this testimony happened behind closed doors after Republicans subpoenaed Smith as part of an investigation into his conduct as special counsel. Smith led two major investigations into Trump, one involving election interference and another involving classified documents. Both cases were later dismissed after Trump won re-election based on legal and procedural grounds rather than findings on the evidence itself. Republicans argue the investigations were politically motivated and represent prosecutorial overreach. Democrats argue Smith followed the facts and that the blocking of public testimony avoids uncomfortable scrutiny. Smith emphasized that the charges were approved by grand juries and said he would pursue the same cases regardless of party affiliation. Chairman Jim Jordan declined to allow a public hearing, though he has said one is not completely off the table. Trump has called Smith a criminal and demanded he be investigated, while Smith says responsibility for the charges rests solely with Trump's actions. Now, why this matters to those of you watching at home goes beyond the partisan headlines. It raises questions about accountability when power changes hands. It also tests whether investigations into presidents can survive long enough to mean anything. Right now, the evidence exists, the cases are closed, and the debate is still very much alive. And now we're heading into Music City, where a story about crime, country music, and second chances just took a very official turn. Country star Jelly Roll has been formally pardoned by Tennessee Governor Bill Lee for felony convictions dating back more than 15 years. The pardon covers a 2003 robbery conviction and a 2008 felony drug possession charge, offenses that once defined his life and now, very publicly, do not. Governor Lee called Jelly Roll's story remarkable and redemptive, saying it was clear this was someone who earned forgiveness, not just requested it. Now, Jelly Roll, whose real name is Jason DeFord, applied for the pardon back in 2024, citing the real-world barriers his record still created, including travel restrictions, touring complications, and basic civil limitations. He's never hidden from his past either. In fact, his music, interviews, and his public persona have been built around it. He's openly talked about being jailed dozens of times, struggling with addiction, and eventually rebuilding his life from the inside out. What makes this story unusual isn't celebrity clemency, it's who backed him. You see, Davidson County Sheriff Darren Hall, the man who once locked Jelly Roll up, became one of his strongest advocates, calling him a walker, not a talker, and praising the impact his music has on young people who feel written off. The pardon doesn't erase Jelly Roll's record, but it clears the legal runway for expungement and removes barriers that followed him even as he became a global star. And in case the symbolism wasn't heavy enough for you, Jelly Roll also opened his once private speakeasy inside his Broadway bar to the public this week, a quiet flex of how far he's come. Now, why this should matter to people watching at home? Because this is what rehabilitation actually looks like when it works. Not perfection, not erasure, but proof that change can be real and sometimes officially recognized. We're taking a quick break here at RoxomTV News, but when we're back, we're going to be joined by our special guest of the day to talk shop about what's going on with Bitcoin in Brazil. So stay tuned, more of that coming up when we're back here at RoxomTV News. Joining us today is a voice that lives at the intersection of markets, macro, and the forces shaping where money actually moves. He's the host of the Better Money podcast, where he cuts through the noise to break down risk, power, and incentives with clarity and edge. Please give a big RoxomTV News welcome to the show to Bernardo Braga, everybody. Bernardo, welcome to the show. Our studio audience is thrilled to have you, and so am I. How are you this Friday? Thanks for joining us.
All good, man. Thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, no, the pleasure is ours, Bernardo. So we're going to talk about a couple of stories here in a second. But first, I would love for you to give our audience the quick 30-second breakdown. Who is Bernardo Braga and what is the Better Money podcast? Tell us about it.
Sure. So I studied economics as an undergrad back in 2003 to 2009. And little did I know that I didn't learn at all economics. So I just learned economics back in 2016, when I first read Austrian school. I read Mises, and then it was a quick jump to understand Bitcoin because I knew what the money problem was, right? After I fell deep in the rabbit hole, everything was useless. I was working in finance, in financial markets, and doing M&A, valuations, private equity, all that stuff. But once I learned about Bitcoin, nothing else made any sense. So I just had to start my own business regarding Bitcoin, and I tried several things, but at the end of the day, sharing the knowledge and my journey was something that I was passionate about, and I started to do that, and it grew gradually, and it's still in the early stages, but it's been very rewarding, and people give a lot of good feedback because there's a lack of good high signal content in Brazil, in Portuguese. So I try to do that. I try to fill that gap and make people better understand what's the best money ever invented by mankind.
Yeah, we're super excited to learn more about that journey in our deep dive in a little bit and kind of dive into more about the Better Money podcast. But before we do, we figured since we have you here today, we thought we'd get started with a couple of Bitcoin topics from your native Brazil to kind of get your take on what's going on there. Does that sound good?
Let's do it.
All right, so the first story we're talking about here is A story that came out a few weeks ago is Brazil's biggest private bank, Itaú Unibanco, is formally recommending that investors allocate 1 to 3% of their portfolios to Bitcoin, framing it as a practical diversification tool rather than a speculative bet. In a research note, Itaú asset management partner Renato Aid described Bitcoin as offering a dual opportunity: returns that are largely uncorrelated with domestic markets and partial protection against currency devaluation, a persistent concern in Brazil. The recommendation is explicitly long-term, warning investors against market timing and positioning Bitcoin as a complementary asset, not a core holding. Now, the note references Itaú's own BIT11 Bitcoin ETF, which trades on Brazil's B3 exchange and holds over $115 million in assets, and reflects the bank's broader push into crypto, including in-house Bitcoin and Ether trading launched in 2023. So what I want to do here is get into our questions. It looks like my prompter here kind of got a little messed up here, guys. Sorry. So let's get into this story here with Bernardo first. So Bernardo, how big of a deal is it that Brazil's biggest bank has come out and said, we're recommending a 1 to 3% allocation into Bitcoin? Is that a big deal? That seems like quite the turn from some of the language we've seen previously. How are you interpreting this news?
I mean, I think we're still in the early stages. This is a minor step. It's inevitable. As we see, there was a turning point back when the spot ETFs were approved in the US back in January 2024. And ever since, I think all the traditional financial markets are just bending the knee to Bitcoin because they they finally see it as inevitable, right? They can kill it, so they might as well join the party. And I think it's just a minor step towards what's going to happen more and more. Now it's 1%, 2%, then it's going to be 5, then 10, and eventually people are going to realize that what the hell am I doing leaving my money at the bank if I could just buy Bitcoin and throw it as self-custody and be a sovereign individual. So I think it's a gradual step. Eventually all banks are going to have to bend the knee because of demand, right? Everybody wants better money. Right. Everybody wants to carry value from the present to the future without loss of energy and efficiency.
Right. 1 to 3%, as a Bitcoiner yourself, would that be the amount you recommend, or do you feel like that's a good amount for people just kind of dipping their toes in the space? Because as I'm sure you're aware, it usually takes people a little bit of time to really wrap their head around Bitcoin. So is that kind of an allocation you would initially recommend to people who are just getting into the space? Hello? We still there for Bernardo? Oh. Yeah, there we go. We got you back. So what would you recommend to someone coming into the space for the first time, Bernardo?
I mean, it really depends on how much conviction have you built so far. And the more you understand, the more you can focus on the long term, and the volatility doesn't hurt you so much. It doesn't drive you crazy at night. Doesn't make you want to click the sell button. So I would say that the most important thing is for you to sit down, study what money is, the problem with fiat money. And when you fully understand Bitcoin and you understand that in the long term, the volatility doesn't matter, then you can build more of a bigger position. But I would say 1 to 3% is just a minor start. It's better than 0 for sure, but it's not enough, right? I'm 100% in Bitcoin, but I know it's not for everybody. But my students and people who join me at Better Money and try to, and want to better understand Bitcoin, eventually they take the leap and they sell their real estate, they sell their equities, and they start turning into Bitcoin with 50, 60, 70%.
Gotcha. So you also mentioned to me off camera before we got started here that because of how things had been going in Brazil, you've actually made the move, I believe you said, to Paraguay. Can you speak to that a little bit? Like, what caused such a big move for you that, you know, to the point where Bitcoin was part of the reason you decided you needed to get out of Brazil for, you know, more orange pastures, I guess?
I mean, you guys are based in the US. You know how bad it was for Bitcoiners and people who love freedom back in the previous government. And a lot of people that have Bitcoin, who are Bitcoiners, and they value freedom so much, they were thinking about leaving to other countries, to El Salvador or to any other place. And that's kind of how we feel at the moment. Ever since January 2023, the left-wing government was elected again. There are a lot of claims of election fraud, but that's away from the point right here. The fact of the matter is that we are now more and more drowning in higher taxes. They are taxing the rich more and more, and what they consider rich is not necessarily rich, but it's getting unbearable. And as the economy deteriorates, Brazil has a fundamental problem. It's kind of a cultural and due with the justice system. There's a lot of violence, especially in the urban areas. So people don't feel safe. Then you have to pay a lot of taxes, and you have to pay for a private community, a gated community. You have to pay for an armored car. And at some point, people have enough. And yeah, pessimism is kind of taking over. So a lot of people who are Bitcoiners and they value their freedom, they value their safety, are starting to flee. I have the privilege of working online, and I can basically take my laptop everywhere in the world and work from home. So I had a discussion with my wife. We recently had a baby, and we realized Brazil has served us well for a while, and now it's time to look for a better place to live. And Paraguay, surprisingly, was a place that was ignored by many people throughout the world, but now it's becoming a hub to onboard a lot of expats, a lot of Bitcoiners. The scene here is growing a lot. There are a lot of meetups with Bitcoin Paraguay. There was a Bitcoin only conference, the first edition, back in September, and they're going to have one next year as well. So yeah, it's getting more and more welcoming for people who love freedom here.
Well, I love freedom too, so I'm glad you made the move for reasons of freedom. And I want to get to your business now. But kind of start at the beginning of your journey here, Bernardo. So before Better Money and Bitcoin became central to what you do, I want you to take us back a bit. When you were studying economics in Brazil, what did you actually think your career path was going to look like at that point? Like, what was the plan initially?
My plan was to earn a lot of money and become rich, because I thought that becoming rich would solve all my problems in the world. I come from a medium class family that didn't have any financial discipline. So even though we had quite some level of comfort and I didn't ever lack anything, I kind of grew up with the sense that money was always a struggle, and I wanted to get rid of the struggle. So I went to economics school because I thought learning about money is going to give me a lot of money. But then I didn't realize I was learning Keynesianism and Marxism and Austrian economics. I didn't know what money is. But when I got into university, the first thing I identified was, who's making a shit ton of money here? Sorry for the French. Or all the bankers. Everybody who was going to investment banking was getting rich quite fast. In 2-3 years out of college, they were making millionaire bonus. So that's what I did. But I graduated at the end of 2008. So talk about bad timing, right? Because it was just after Lehman Brothers went bust. There was no investment banking anymore. So I kind of went into the buy side to do M&A and private equity, worked in finance throughout a decade or so. But I didn't make the tons of money that I was expecting. And then I decided it was time for me to do an MBA abroad, because the problem was with Brazil. As you probably know, Brazil is always on the verge of taking off, but it never does, right? The economy is always, it flies like a pigeon, we like to say, but like a chicken. So basically, I decided it was time for me to go abroad, do an MBA abroad, and then it would open doors and I could work in Europe, work in the US. But then I learned about Bitcoin, and nothing else was the same ever again. So yeah, that was pretty much it. That was my journey, working in finance. And look, go ahead.
Yeah, and how did Bitcoin enter for you? Like, how did it show up in your life when you initially heard about it? Like, were you all in, or like a lot of us out there, did it take some time to kind of wrap your head around how important Bitcoin is and how important it was going to be? What was your kind of orange pill moment, as the kids call it, like?
So it was my second year working in Amsterdam at a multinational firm, and I had a kind of a early stage midlife crisis, because it was the second winter that I was going through there. It was very lonely. I was not adapting well. I didn't speak Dutch. So I kind of had a burnout at the point, and then I started learning about meditation, going to some events, self-development events. And I was in this event in Bulgaria where I sat down next to a guy at dinner, and he was talking about all sorts of things. And then he spoke about Bitcoin, but he did it in quite a convincing way that planted me a seed. I went back home, I started studying. I watched that famous documentary from the infamous gold bug, Mike Malone, Hidden Secrets of Money. And then I finally understood what the Ponzi scheme was and how the financial markets work and how the monetary system actually works. Nothing else that was ever the same. So Bitcoin became kind of my mission in life, my ikigai, as you say, because I knew about financial markets. I knew how to work in that. I knew about money now, and I knew that was the solution. Fix the money, fix the world. So yeah, I had to teach others about it. But my journey as a Bitcoiner was not very smooth because I entered back in 2017. First time I bought Bitcoin, I think was $2,000, something like that. And as you probably remember, 2017 was the age of ICOs and all the shitcoiners were rampant, and there was not a lot of high signal content, Bitcoin only content. So I kind of became a maxi back in 2021. So I lost a lot of Bitcoin along the way with leverage trading, with shitcoins, with all that stuff. So yeah, I kind of made my mission in life to let people learn from my mistakes and not having to go through the pain. So that's what I pretty much what I try to do with my content and my podcasts and my videos.
Yeah, I love that. And you're empowering other people through your content to kind of start and and manage their own Bitcoin journey, because that's really what it is for all of us. It's never a straight line. It's a path of a lot of side quests and things like that till we kind of get on the short and narrow for what we an understanding our understanding of Bitcoin. Now, coming from like a traditional economics background like you did, Bitcoin tends to challenge some very core assumptions. What was the hardest idea about money you had to unlearn once Bitcoin started making sense to you?
One thing that kind of blew my mind, and it was very painful to accept it at first, was the fact that once you realize that the student loans you have or any kind of loans that you get, it's not money that actually belonged to somebody else at first and they lent it to the bank and the bank relent it to you, but it was basically somebody at the bank pressed the button at their keyboard and money magically sprung into existence and then enslaved you into that. That was a painful reality to accept at first. I think that was the most marking moment. I think led me into an existential crisis of sorts, but it was liberating at some point.
Yeah, no, I could definitely understand that. And I remember I was really excited to have you on the show today, coming from Brazil specifically, because this is a country that has lived through inflation, currency swings, and lots of financial instability in ways many other countries haven't. So looking back now, how much did growing up in Brazil's environment prepare you to understand Bitcoin maybe a little faster than most people?
I usually make the joke that the head of marketing of Bitcoin Brazil is Lula, our president, because the more inflation grows, the more people feel the pain, and they don't actually are well versed in Bitcoin. They on money in general. They don't have financial education. I think it's on purpose, of course, but they feel the pain, and the more they feel the pain, the more inclined they are to look for solutions. And Bitcoin is there since 2009. One block is getting out every 10 minutes, and it's doing what it's doing its thing. So it's becoming more decentralized, more secure, and it kind of solves the money problem for most people. But volatility is still a major element that scares a lot of people away, so they have to educate themselves. But I would say that as the scenario becomes more and more deteriorating and more painful, especially for the lower to mid-class people who live paycheck to paycheck, there's a massive incentive for people to escape, right? And now we have this escape hatch called Bitcoin. So I'm very thankful for it, because otherwise we would be kind of screwed. There was no solution.
Yeah, and you mentioned a very important word there, and that's pain. And that's something that we've seen with a lot of South American countries, that's currency is being debased at values that we don't really see or haven't seen in America the same way. But it seems like it's kind of given a lot of South American people a head start in the Bitcoin race, because they're having to encounter problems that other parts of the world aren't yet with the same level of severity. But it's really given you kind of a head start in your own Bitcoin journey, because people in America, we don't think about Bitcoin, or most people don't, the same way people in other countries do, where their currency is being deflated so badly compared to here in the United States. And we're just starting to feel inflation now a little bit differently, which I think is turning a lot of Americans toward Bitcoin in ways we hadn't seen previously. So we're going to take a quick break here, Bernardo, but when we're back, we're going to chat with you about the Better Money podcast, who's it's for, what people can expect from it, and how to watch it. So stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back with more RoxomTV news and Bernardo Braga right after this quick break.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Security matters. Zappo Bank, the only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
About your podcast, okay? So when you decided to start the Better Money podcast, what problem were you actually trying to solve, and who did you feel wasn't being spoken to in the existing money and Bitcoin conversation that you wanted to address with the podcast? Tell us about it.
I was just doing it off the record, right? So I was having conversations and reading and talking to people about Bitcoin all the time. So it's just an obvious step to press record and do it online. And the fact that as time passed, I was getting more and more connected and meeting brilliant Bitcoiners in Brazil and abroad. So it was kind of obvious that I needed to do this, and Better Money podcast grew kind of organically through that. I had some major guests so far, very proud of it. I had some episodes in English. Surprisingly, people don't watch it as much when it's in English because of the subtitles. I refuse to do it out of dub. So I had Alex Vetsky, Nat Brunel, Brian Estes, Sam Callahan, a lot of Americans here, and a lot of Brazilian Bitcoiners, treasury companies, hard maxis, developers. So it's been a fun journey so far. And people like it a lot. They become a loyal audience.
That's amazing. And yeah, you mentioned some real heavy hitters there. And when we were talking off camera earlier, you actually spoke of someone you had recently that we had on the show, I think just last week. We've had him a couple times, who's really great, Mauricio Del Bartolomeo of Ledin. And I know you had some stuff come up during that interview. What can you tell us went down?
Dude, I think that was probably the most important conversation about Bitcoin that I ever had. We didn't talk about Ledin. We didn't talk about BTC-backed loans. We just talked about his personal journey and how his family fled Venezuela. So he walked us through the entire episode. Basically, when Hugo Chavez won the election back in '95, I think, his dad transferred all the family to spend a year in Miami. And he was kind of 16, 15 years old. I don't remember exactly. But he remembers that when he met Cubans there and he talked about how he was from Venezuela and he was spending some time in Miami, they always hugged him and say, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry you lost your country." And he had absolutely no idea what they were talking about. He was like, "No, Chavez is gonna lose the next election. Don't worry about it. Venezuela is too big to fail. We're never gonna go full communist." And they were like, "Dude, you don't know what you're talking about. Let's talk again in 5 years or so." And once you look at how it started and how it evolved or devolved, Brazil is kind of the same path. It's exactly the same narrative, exactly the same deterioration of institutions. And the fact that this last election was very dubious and people were claiming and asking for help for their armed forces, they camped outside the barracks and help didn't come. Eventually, the left-wing president went to Brasilia and took the stage. I don't think there's salvation anymore. I don't think there's a solution. Not if we try to do it in order and look for the institutions to go back and function again. So yeah, I think Brazil is going down the same path and it's just going to get worse and worse. And as we are observing now, there's a tax reform that's going to start January 1st. People with money, entrepreneurs, people who kind of who actually add value to society, they're just exhausted. They're fleeing. They're going to Miami. They're going to Paraguay like me. They're going to Uruguay. They're going all sorts of places. And as you know, once you disrespect private property and you start extracting more and more value from people who actually create value, eventually you pass some line in the sand and they get fed up and they start fleeing, and then it gets exponentially worse. So yeah, that was a very important episode because that conversation, we made a lot of parallels and identify a lot of similarities. And that was probably the first seed that was planted in a lot of people's heads because they were in denial. They were thinking, this is temporary. This is never going to happen in Brazil. It's too big. And once it hit, they realize that they have to do something about it. So they are starting looking for second citizenships, for a plan B, and yeah, that helped a lot of people.
Yeah, that sounds super interesting. I mean, these are real stories told by real Bitcoiners about how their worldview is shaped from, the lives that they lived. And that was something I really appreciated when I was checking out your content, is that it feels very different from a lot of the hype-driven, price-obsessed side of crypto media that we see out there on the TikToks and whatnot. So my question for you, Bernardo, is, was that a conscious choice from day one, or did it kind of evolve as you found your voice on the Better Money podcast? Like, was this always kind of the lane, these real stories of real people, or is that something that kind of evolved over time for you?
Yeah, I think it was conscious. I've always been passionate about markets and looking at macro context and analyzing the fundamentals and thinking from first principles. So I don't actually get too glued to charts, and I don't analyze indicators, and I'm not looking at short-term outlooks and trading or nothing like that. And I think the market is kind of saturated. People are fed up of looking at short-term gains because Bitcoin is a minor asset compared to global wealth. It's less than $2 trillion market cap. It's very easy to manipulate and to have big swings up or down in an instant. So it's just a massive casino at the end of the day. If you're trading short-term, you're going to lose money to Wall Street, to Larry Fink, to whoever it is who has trillions of dollars and can bump the price up or down. So yeah, I was always inclined to do content about the fundamentals and why Bitcoin and how Bitcoin is a freedom tool that empowers the individual. And we also talk about markets. We talk about the current environment and how geopolitics and the micro environment and liquidity influences price, but always focus on the long term. And I think that's a sweet spot that people miss a lot. They don't have that kind of content here in Brazil.
Yeah, and I think that's so important that you have a channel that is preaching the long term, because especially in today's 24/7 news media cycles, you can trade and buy cryptos 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it does kind of turn things, like you mentioned, in kind of an online casino. So, with that being said, most financial content out there seems to kind of sell urgency. You, however, sell patience. So my question for you is, how do you convince people that slow thinking about money is actually more powerful than the fast profits we see everyone chasing out there?
I think you have to take a step back and you have to do the work. Nobody's going to do the work for you. Nobody's going to step into your brain and program it and make you understand Bitcoin and its inevitability, superior monetary properties. As you do that yourself and you build the conviction necessary, then you can be in a privileged position to understand that in the long term, it's inevitable. There's only one way in the chart, which is up and to the right. So you can just chill. Like, you can put your head at the pillow every single night, and it doesn't matter if Bitcoin has fallen 30% a week, you're going to be fine. And also, managing risk is quite important, right? You can just go all in on Bitcoin and put the money that you're going to need for rent next week, because then you're going to be subject to a lot of pain in the short term. So yeah, that's what I teach. I have some online courses that I was trying to sell at some point, but I realized I'm not reaching as many people as I would like, putting a paywall in between the knowledge and them. So I just open source everything. I put it in the YouTube channel. People can just go there, not sign up. I don't need their data. They just can just click, watch the introduction, watch the fundamentals, and understand the money problem, understand what money is, the monetary properties that make Bitcoin the best money ever invented, and then learn about Bitcoin. If they they want help implementing self-custody, or thinking about their portfolio, or looking for a way to pay less taxes, or looking for a second citizenship, things like that. I have all sorts of partnerships here with Better Money that we can help them along the journey and facilitate and speed up the process. But yeah, my goal ultimately is to help the most amount of people possible understand what money is and how Bitcoin would empower them.
I love that. It's a very worthwhile journey. And, you talk about your audience kind of looking for education in these different things. When you started Better Money and the audience started growing, did the audience that showed up kind of match who you expected? Or did you end up attracting a very different crowd than maybe you originally thought you would? How did that play out for you?
I think it's quite a surprise that they are more of age than I would expect. I would expect people to be younger in the audience, but the median age is 45 years old. And there are a lot of people who are retires. They were like 55, 65, 70 years old even, mostly male. I don't know exactly why the women are not there, but I have 95% of the audience are male. I think it's mostly people who are working their ass off the entire life to build a prosperous life for their family and give their daughters and sons and wives comfort and security. And they work honestly, and they were stuck in the rat race, and now they're realizing that they've been a victim to debasement their entire life, and Bitcoin is a solution. So yeah, that's the kind of people who are looking for a solution and who are looking for more freedom, more sovereignty. That's a profile that actually gets attracted by the signal that we put out.
Yeah, and the Bitcoin signal this year has been quite unique, right? We've seen a lot of government tailwinds, especially here in the United States. We're seeing institutions at mass acquiring Bitcoin for themselves. So it kind of begs a question for me. As we've seen Bitcoin move closer to institutions and become part of more of mainstream finance, have you noticed a shift in the kinds of questions your audience is asking you as a result of kind of the new narrative we've seen in 2025 for Bitcoin? Have those things changed at all noticeably?
I think the most pressing point at this moment is the fact that a lot of people are surprised even and fed up with the the never starting bull market. People were looking at the news, they were looking at Trump and all the measures that he took, the executive order, creating the strategic reserve, all the institutions jumping in, the treasury companies, the pension funds, the sovereign funds. And we expected a massive face melting bull market at 2025. It didn't come. So it's been a negative year so far in terms of sentiment from Bitcoiners. They expected more. But I think a lot of people are on the fence, not kind of scared even that the bear market is going to start because they cling to the idea of the 4-year cycle driven by the halving. And I try to deprogram them from that thinking. I don't think the 4-year cycle is a thing anymore. I think it's not been a thing for a while. Maybe the last 2 cycles had more to do with liquidity levels than the halving in itself. And liquidity didn't come, right? So I think now we're in the tipping point, and 2026 is poised to be a very positive year. And hopefully we're in the start of the S curve of new technology adoption, and we might be entering a super cycle. Let's see what destiny has for us. But I'm very, very bullish. This is why I'm wearing my bullish hat.
Oh yeah, love the hat, love the hat. And I love that we have people like you that are here to help educate so much of our Bitcoin audience out there for this next phase of Bitcoin's journey. Because as you mentioned, I agree with you. I don't think the 4-year cycle is going to play out the same way we've seen in the past. And we need really good stewards of the space educating people as Bitcoin continues to evolve into this new asset class that we're seeing happen right before us. And I'm sure you have gained undeniably a couple new followers here in our audience today. So for those in our audience that are like, listen, I need to get more of Bernardo, I need to check out the Better Money podcast, what's the best place I can send them so they can get more info and check out the podcast for themselves?
Sure, just go to YouTube. Everything's there. I used to do some content for Instagram, but Instagram is not a very welcoming environment for most Bitcoiners. I don't know why, but every time somebody tries to follow me, they get an alert. Are you sure you want to follow this guy? As if I was a scammer, but I just talk about Bitcoin and I try to empower individuals, but eventually I grew tired of it. So I'm in Twitter, X, as at Bernardo Braga. So that's EU, which is I in Brazil, Bernardo Braga, all together. And on YouTube, it's at Canal, which is channel in Portuguese. So Canal Better Money, all together as well. Most of the content is in Portuguese, but you can also translate. And also, there are a lot of podcasts in English. So you have a lot of stuff there. And all the courses are open source, as I said. So there's one section there, a playlist of courses. You're welcome to join and watch and educate yourself about Bitcoin. There are a lot of tutorials on self-custody, multi-sig, everything you need is over there. So welcome.
Amazing. Well, yeah, it sounds like you've got all the big topics covered. And you mentioned some of the guests you've had on your show, Natalie Brunel, Mauricio, sounds like a can't miss episode. So I definitely encourage our audience to go out there, check out the Better Money podcast so you can stay up to date in everything that's going on in the Bitcoin space. And I got to tell you, Bernardo, it was an absolute pleasure having you here with us on RoxomTV News today. I want to thank you so much for lending your time and expertise to us and our audience here today. And I definitely, encourage everybody to go check out the Better Money podcast. And I hope you, my friend, have a happy holiday season and a new year, because I think 2026 is going to be an exciting one for us Bitcoiners out there.
For sure. Thank you so much for the invitation. It was a pleasure to be here, and congrats on the show. It's awesome, and keep doing it because it's only going to grow more, and it's very, very needed. People need to learn about Bitcoin more and more. And this world is getting more and more turbulent and complicated. So yeah, Bitcoin is a must for everybody who loves freedom, as you and me.
All right, and it's bringing us all together. Can't ask for much more than that. So Bernardo, thank you so much again for your time today. Enjoy your weekend, my friend, and we'll have to have you back in 2026. All right, gang, that is a wrap for this week's RoxomTV News. We are going to be on holiday break next week, but we will be broadcasting some of our favorite episodes, including some of our guests that if you didn't catch them the first time, you're going to want to watch them next week. So make sure to tune in. RoxomTV News will still be up and running, and I hope you all have a safe and happy holidays and weekend, and we will see you all live again in a week right here at Roxom TV. So thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, make sure to like, follow, subscribe to Roxom TV, Roxom TV News, and me at Hank at Roxom TV, wherever you choose to do your doom scrolling. And we will see you next week with some of our best videos and recaps of our favorite episodes. So thanks for tuning in, and have a nice weekend, everybody. See you later.